My name's Raegan, I'm 36. And a few months ago, I was one bus ride away from breaking down completely. For years, I carried my husband, our kids, and every single burden that came with keeping this family alive. I thought exhaustion was just part of love. Until that night. One bus conversation changed everything I believed about loyalty, sacrifice, and what it really means to be strong. Tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about real family courage. The night I nearly collapsed started like any other: gray skies, traffic noise, and the smell of burnt coffee stuck on my clothes after another double shift at the diner. I remember checking the clock in the kitchen before I left for work that morning, 5:07 a.m., and realizing I hadn't sat down for a proper meal in 3 days. My body moved on caffeine and stubbornness. That's all I had left. By the time my last table cleared, the soles of my shoes were slick with grease, my back ached, and the tips in my pocket barely covered tomorrow's gas. When you live in survival mode long enough, exhaustion doesn't even surprise you anymore. It becomes your shadow. I was that woman, the one people glance at and think, she's strong. But strength isn't always bravery. Sometimes it's just what's left when there's no other option. At home, things have been falling apart quietly, like wallpaper peeling in corners you don't notice until it's too late. My husband, Derek, used to be a decent man. He worked construction, brought home jokes, and smelled like sweat and sawdust. But after the company downsized 2 years ago, something in him broke. At first, I told myself he just needed time. Everyone handles job loss differently. But months stretched into years, and Derek's ambition turned into excuses. I picked up a second job, then a third weekend shift. I told myself it was temporary, that he'd bounce back. Instead, I came home to video games and empty beer bottles. He said he was networking online. I said nothing, because that's what I did best, keep the peace. I'd come home at midnight, peel off my shoes, and stare at the unpaid bills on the counter. His name was on half of them, but his effort was on none. That particular night, rain was coming down hard, fat drops slapping the pavement. I stood at the bus stop after work, shivering under a streetlight that flickered like it couldn't decide whether to give up or keep trying. It felt familiar. A young couple stood a few feet away, laughing, sharing earbuds. I envied their lightness, their ability to smile without pretending. My life had become a collection of fake smiles and long sighs. When the bus finally pulled up, I climbed aboard, dropped my last few coins in the slot, and found a seat near the middle. My reflection in the window looked older than 36. There were dark circles under my eyes, lines around my mouth. I used to have dreams once. Somewhere between raising kids, paying bills, and carrying Derek's dead weight, those dreams turned into grocery lists. That night, I was too tired even to think. At home, I knew Derek would be waiting, not to help, but to complain. He'd ask what was for dinner. He'd mention how stressful it is to job hunt all day online. And I'd probably nod, heat up leftovers, and pretend not to notice the cigarette smell even though we'd agreed he'd quit. But I didn't want to go home yet. Not tonight. The bus rocked gently, tires hissing over wet asphalt. City lights blurred past like streaks of melted gold. My body slumped against the window, half asleep but too anxious to fully rest. I kept hearing Derek's voice in my head, his constant, tired excuses. I'm trying, Raegan. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. The thing was, I did know, because I'd lost everything too. My joy, my rest, my hope. The next stop jolted me back when an older woman climbed aboard. She looked like someone's grandmother. Thin coat, gray hair pinned up neatly, eyes that seemed to notice everything. She smiled as she passed me, a kind, tired smile. I didn't know then how much that smile would matter later. For now, I was still lost in my own silence. When I finally got home, the house smelled like beer and cold pizza. The TV was on. Derek was sprawled across the couch, game controller in hand, half asleep. I stood in the doorway for a moment, dripping from the rain, my uniform clinging to me like a second skin. He barely looked up. "You're late," he muttered. "Yeah," I said quietly, dropping my bag. "Double shift." He grunted, eyes still on the screen. "We out of milk, and the Wi-Fi's slow again. Can you call them tomorrow?" Something inside me cracked, not loud, just a small invisible snap, somewhere deep. I looked at him, really looked. The man I'd married was gone. In his place sat someone who'd let go of caring. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and stared at half a gallon of milk that wasn't missing after all. He hadn't even checked. He just expected me to fix things. As I made myself a cup of instant noodles, I thought about how strange marriage is. You start out holding hands, dreaming about shared futures, and one day you're standing over a sink wondering how you ended up raising a man instead of loving one. When I climbed into bed later, Derek was already snoring. I lay there staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between the creaks of the old fan. Each sound felt like a tiny reminder of how stuck I was. I wanted to cry, but I was too tired to even do that. The next morning, I woke before dawn again. My body moved like clockwork. Coffee, uniform, packed lunch, the bus stop. But something felt different. There was a heaviness I couldn't shake, like the world had quietly decided it was time for me to notice how broken everything was. Halfway through my shift, I burned my wrist on the grill because I wasn't paying attention. The manager, a sweet woman named Carol, gave me an ice pack and asked if I was okay. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just tired." She looked at me for a long moment before saying, "Raegan, you can't pour from an empty cup." Her words stuck with me. That night, when I came home early hoping Derek might have made dinner, I found him on the porch with two of his buddies, laughing loud, drinking beer bought with the grocery money I'd left. My kids were inside, eating cereal for dinner. I didn't yell. I just stood there, watching them. Then I went back inside, washed a few dishes, and tucked my daughter into bed. She asked, "Mom, are you sad?" I smiled weakly. "Just sleepy, baby." But deep down, I knew it wasn't sleep I needed. It was rest from a life that felt like punishment. A few days later, another letter came from the electric company. Final notice. I placed it beside the others, like a collection of quiet failures. I waited for Derek to bring it up, to show concern, but he didn't. Instead, he complained that the house felt too depressing. I wanted to scream, to ask if he knew what it felt like to work 16 hours and still feel like you're drowning. But I didn't. I just nodded again, holding everything inside like I always did. That night, something shifted. When I stepped outside to throw trash, I saw my reflection in the dark kitchen window. I barely recognized myself. My hands were rough, my eyes dull. I whispered out loud, "This can't be it. This can't be my life." The sound of my own voice startled me. It had been so long since I'd heard it speak honestly. I looked up at the cloudy sky, the faint hum of distant traffic filling the silence. And for the first time in a long while, I admitted to myself I was done pretending. But even then, I didn't know what done meant yet. I only knew I couldn't keep carrying everything. His mistakes, our debts, the weight of everyone else's comfort. I needed something to change. That change would start unexpectedly on a quiet night bus just a week later. But for now, I went back inside, took a deep breath, and told myself I'd make it through one more day. Just one more. I didn't know that those tired words, spoken to no one, would be the beginning of the end of my old life. The rain had softened to a mist by the time I stepped out, the weight of the morning still pressing against my chest. My shoes made soft splashes as I crossed the uneven pavement toward the bus stop. I remember clutching my bag close, my fingers tracing the worn leather strap that had begun to fray from years of use. It was a small thing, but it reminded me of how long I'd been holding everything together. The bills, the meals, the moods, the silence. The streetlights flickered lazily against the fog, and the chill bit through my sleeves. The bus arrived with a low growl, its headlights slicing through the gloom. As the doors hissed open, a gust of warm, stale air greeted me. I climbed aboard, tapping my card against the reader, and moved toward an empty seat near the back. I sat down heavily, the exhaustion settling deeper into my bones. My mind replayed the morning argument, my husband's indifferent shrug, his muttered words about how I worry too much, how things will fix themselves. But nothing ever did. I was tired of being the only one trying to keep us afloat. The bus rattled forward, its rhythmic hum oddly comforting. I leaned against the cool glass of the window, watching streaks of rain chase one another down the pane. Outside, the city blurred into muted tones of gray and amber, tired people, tired buildings, tired hearts. And then she sat down across from me. She was maybe in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes that carried a strange calm, the kind of calm that comes after weathering too many storms. Her clothes were simple, but there was something deliberate about her appearance, as if every thread had been chosen with quiet intention. Her hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back neatly, and a faint scent of jasmine drifted through the air as she settled into her seat. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. She smiled politely, the kind of smile strangers exchange before retreating into their own worlds, and then turned to look out the window. But something about her lingered in my mind. A few minutes passed in silence. The bus hissed to a stop near the market, and a group of schoolchildren climbed aboard, their laughter slicing through the stillness. I glanced at the woman again. She was staring straight ahead, but her expression had changed. A flicker of pain crossed her face, so brief it might have been imagined. Then, softly, she spoke. "Long morning." Her voice was gentle, low, the kind that instantly made you want to listen. I blinked, caught off guard. "You could say that," I murmured, forcing a small laugh. "Just one of those days." She nodded knowingly, as if she understood more than I had said. "It's always those days that tell us who we really are," she replied. I wasn't sure what to make of that, but there was a strange comfort in her tone, like talking to someone who had already read the chapter of your life you were still struggling to write. We rode in silence again. The rain returned, tapping gently against the glass. I could feel her eyes on me from time to time, not in a judging way, but as if she was quietly waiting for me to speak. And before I even realized it, I did. "I don't know why I'm saying this," I began, my voice barely audible over the hum of the engine, "but I feel like I'm carrying everything alone. My husband lost his job last year. I've been working extra shifts, managing bills, keeping the kids steady. But it's like he's disappeared into himself. I'm still here doing everything, and he's just existing." The woman didn't interrupt. She just listened, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her silence felt like permission to keep going. "Sometimes I think he resents me for keeping things together," I continued, my throat tightening, like I'm making him feel smaller. "But what choice do I have? Someone has to keep this family from falling apart." She exhaled slowly, her gaze soft but intense. "You remind me of someone," she said after a pause. "Someone who thought the same thing, that holding everything up alone meant strength. But strength isn't about how much we carry. It's about knowing when to put something down." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at her, unsure how to respond. "You don't even know me," I said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but pain has a language, and I speak it fluently." For a while, we didn't say anything. The bus rolled past familiar streets, The bakery, the old bookshop, the corner cafe that always smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast. I could feel something inside me shifting, an ache I had ignored for too long beginning to stir. Then she asked, "Have you ever just stopped, sat down, and asked yourself what you want, not what everyone else needs from you?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I thought about my mornings, the rush of packing lunches, ironing shirts, paying bills, checking the calendar, remembering appointments. I thought about the evenings, the quiet dinners, the forced smiles, the exhaustion masked as patience. When had I last wanted something that was just for me? I don't think I even remember what that feels like. I admitted. Her eyes softened. Then maybe that's where you need to start. The bus slowed at the next stop, and a few passengers got off. The world outside felt heavier, somehow, as if the rain had turned the streets into mirrors reflecting all the things I'd been avoiding. We kept talking, or rather, I kept talking, and she kept listening, really listening the way no one had in a long time. I told her things I hadn't said out loud to anyone. How I sometimes sat in the car after work just to delay going home, how I felt invisible even when surrounded by family, how every little argument made me feel smaller, like I was vanishing piece by piece. She never offered pity, only presence. You know, she said, finally, sometimes the people we love become comfortable with our pain. They start expecting us to absorb everything because we've always done it. But you can't keep saving everyone at the cost of losing yourself. I swallowed hard, her words echoing in the quiet. "Who are you?" I asked. She smiled, a knowing, bittersweet smile. Someone who learned that lesson too late. There was something haunting in her tone, a kind of weary truth that made me want to ask more. But before I could, the bus jolted to a stop near the downtown intersection. The driver called out something about a delay ahead. A few passengers groaned. The woman looked toward the window. "This is my stop," she said, standing slowly. "Wait," I started, but she turned to me, her hand resting lightly on the seat in front. "You're stronger than you think, Raegan," she said softly. My heart skipped. I hadn't told her my name. "How did you?" But she only smiled again, that same gentle, mysterious smile. Sometimes we see ourselves in others more clearly than we ever did in the mirror. And with that, she stepped off the bus. I sat frozen, my thoughts spinning. The rain had stopped, and sunlight was breaking through the clouds, casting fractured light across the street. I looked outside, scanning for her, but she was gone. Gone, as if she had never been there at all. The bus started moving again, and I leaned back, my pulse still racing. I replayed her words in my mind. You can't keep saving everyone at the cost of losing yourself. For the first time in years, those words felt like a permission slip I didn't know I needed. As the city rolled by, something inside me began to quiet, not the silence of defeat, but the kind of silence that comes before change. I didn't know who that woman really was or how she knew my name, but her presence had left a mark I couldn't shake. I found myself thinking about what she said, about putting things down, about remembering what I wanted. The thought scared me, but it also felt strangely freeing. The rest of the ride passed in a blur. When I finally got off near my workplace, I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the damp air. The world looked the same. The traffic, the chatter, the smell of coffee drifting from the corner shop, but something inside me had shifted, subtle yet undeniable. That bus ride, that brief encounter, felt like the beginning of something I couldn't yet name. And as I walked toward the office, I whispered to myself, maybe it's time to stop carrying everything alone. Little did I know that woman, whoever she was, hadn't just given me advice. She had set something in motion, something that would soon uncover truths I wasn't ready to face. But that's the thing about change. It never asks for permission. It just arrives, quietly, like a woman on a bus. The office clock ticked louder than usual that afternoon, each second dragging me further into a fog I couldn't seem to shake. The woman from the bus. Her words, her knowing smile, the way she said my name kept looping in my mind like a song I couldn't turn off. I tried to focus on my work, typing reports, answering calls, forcing myself into the rhythm of routine. But even as my hands moved across the keyboard, my mind was somewhere else. Every now and then, I caught myself staring at the reflection in my computer screen, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, the faint trace of mascara smudged under one lid. That reflection didn't look like me anymore. By the time I clocked out, the sky had shifted to a deep violet hue. I walked toward the bus stop again, my steps slower this time. The air smelled of rain-soaked asphalt, and a thin mist hovered above the street. I kept glancing at every passenger who boarded, half hoping, half dreading that I'd see her again, that mysterious woman who had somehow cracked me open with just a few words. But she wasn't there. The ride home felt longer than usual. I pressed my forehead against the glass, watching the city pass by. The flicker of neon signs, the shadowed faces in passing cars, the faint hum of life moving faster than I could keep up. When the bus finally turned onto our street, a cold realization settled in my stomach. I wasn't ready to go home. Not yet. Still, I forced myself off the bus and walked toward the house. The porch light was off again. I had told him 100 times to leave it on when he got home before me. A small thing, but small things build walls when they keep being ignored. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The living room was dim, lit only by the flicker of the TV. My husband, Matt, was on the couch, his feet propped on the coffee table, surrounded by empty cans and crumpled snack wrappers. "Hey," I said quietly, setting my bag down. He barely looked up. "Hey." That was it. One word, flat and empty. I moved toward the kitchen, the sound of the refrigerator hum filling the silence. The sink was full again. I started washing dishes just to have something to do, the warm water soothing my cold fingers. "Did you eat?" I asked. "Yeah." His voice came from the living room, distant, distracted. I didn't even bother asking what he ate. I already knew it wasn't the leftovers I'd made last night. As I dried my hands, I caught sight of a folded paper on the counter, a letter addressed to Matthew Green. It was from a company I didn't recognize. The logo was printed in bold blue letters, and something about it made my pulse quicken. I opened it, telling myself it wasn't snooping, that I had every right to know what was going on. It was a job offer. A good one. My eyes skimmed the details, position, salary, start date, and then stopped at the line that said, "We look forward to welcoming you on the 5th. The 5th. That was 3 weeks ago. I stood there, frozen. He'd gotten a job. He hadn't said a word. The realization sank in slow, like poison spreading through veins. Why wouldn't he tell me? Why keep it secret? I turned, letter still in hand. "Matt." He didn't respond. "Matt." I said louder. He glanced over, frowning. "What?" I held up the paper. "You got a job. Why didn't you tell me?" He blinked, confused, then irritated. "Because it's none of your business yet. None of my—" I stopped, my voice trembling. "What does that even mean? We've been drowning for months. I've been working double shifts just to keep the lights on. And you— What? You just hide this from me." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're overreacting again, Raegan." I wanted to make sure it was stable before saying anything. "Stable," I repeated, disbelief cutting through the exhaustion. "You started 3 weeks ago. You've been going out every morning. I thought you were still job hunting. I worried. He cut me off. "You don't have to control everything all the time." The words hit harder than I expected. Control. That was his favorite accusation, one he threw at me whenever I tried to hold our crumbling life together. I stared at him, my heart pounding. "This isn't about control," Matt, this is about trust. He looked away, his jaw tightening. You always make everything about you. Maybe that's why I didn't tell you. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. There it was, the shift I'd been feeling for months, but hadn't wanted to face. The distance between us wasn't just emotional. It was built from small betrayals like this. The silence, the omissions, the quiet resentment that grew in the dark corners of our home. I set the letter down on the coffee table and walked to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. My hands were trembling as I sat on the edge of the bed. The air in the room felt heavy, like the walls themselves were listening. And then I noticed something else. A faint smell. Sweet. Floral. Familiar. I turned toward the nightstand. A different perfume bottle sat there. Not mine. I picked it up. The label had rubbed off, but I knew the scent immediately. Jasmine. The same scent from the woman on the bus. My blood ran cold. No, it couldn't be. I looked around, my heart hammering. Nothing else seemed out of place. The sheets were the same, the clothes in the closet untouched. But that scent, it was unmistakable. I could still smell it on my coat from that day. I clutched the bottle tighter, my mind spinning. What were the odds? When Matt finally came into the room, I was sitting perfectly still, the bottle in my hand. Where did this come from? I asked quietly. He froze, eyes flicking to the perfume. I must have been. Don't, I said sharply. Don't lie. His lips parted, but no words came out. A sickening silence filled the space between us. Finally, he said, "It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. Then what is it, Matt? Because it sure smells like something you forgot to hide. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. She's a co-worker. She gave me a ride one day, and I guess she left it here by accident. The air left my lungs. A co-worker. So you've been seeing someone? I whispered. He stopped pacing. No, Raegan, you're twisting this. But his tone wasn't defensive. It was weary. Tired. The kind of tired that comes when someone is done pretending. The world around me seemed to tilt. My pulse roared in my ears. I stood, stepping closer. Who is she? He hesitated, and then with a quiet sigh said, "Her name's Lila." Lila. The name didn't mean anything, but somehow it felt familiar. I thought of the woman on the bus again, the jasmine scent, the way she had looked at me, the strange calm in her eyes. It couldn't be her. Could it? Where does she work? I asked. He hesitated. The same building as me. The room seemed to spin. My heart slammed against my ribs. She gave you a ride, I said slowly, piecing it together. And she just happened to leave her perfume in our bedroom. He didn't answer. I stepped back, my hands shaking. You know what hurts the most, Matt? It's not even that you might be lying. It's that you don't even care enough to lie well. He looked up, guilt flickering behind his eyes, but he said nothing. I turned away, gripping the dresser for balance. My mind raced, flashes of that bus ride. Her voice, her words. You're stronger than you think, Raegan. The way she said my name. The way she vanished before I could ask anything else. Was it all a coincidence? Or had she known exactly who I was? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me flinch. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the scent of jasmine thick in the air. By morning, the decision had settled quietly inside me, not loud or angry, but steady. I wasn't going to break. Not this time. When Matt left for work, I waited a few minutes before slipping out too. The air was cool, the streets still damp from last night's rain. I walked to the bus stop, heart pounding, unsure what I was even looking for. The bus arrived, just like before. I climbed aboard, scanning every seat. Empty faces. Strangers. No trace of her. I sat down anyway, staring out the window as the city blurred by. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world. I just felt awake. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth wasn't done with me yet. Because behind every closed door, there's always another one waiting to be opened. The morning light spilled through the bus window, turning the fog outside into a pale gold haze. My reflection looked steadier this time, not the same woman who had fallen apart days ago. Something had changed in me. The exhaustion was still there, yes, but now it had a shape, a purpose. I wasn't going to scream or cry or throw anything. That wasn't my kind of revenge. I was done begging to be seen. My revenge would be quiet, careful, the kind that doesn't announce itself until it's already over. As the bus rattled along, I spotted the tall glass building where Matt worked. I hadn't planned to get off there, but something inside me shifted. I pulled the cord, stood up, and stepped onto the sidewalk just as the bus pulled away. The building loomed above me, sharp, cold, mirrored. I could see my own reflection in the tinted glass doors. I straightened my coat, smoothed my hair, and walked inside. The lobby was busy, filled with people in suits and heels, carrying coffee cups and clipped voices. I moved toward the reception desk, pretending to check my phone. My pulse was quick, but my face stayed calm. "Hi," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I'm looking for someone, Matthew Green. I'm his wife. He asked me to drop something off, but I forgot which floor he's on." The receptionist, a young man with a headset, typed something into the computer. "He's on the 6th floor, marketing division. You can take the elevator down that hall." "Thank you," I said softly. The elevator ride was silent except for the faint hum of the machinery. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored walls, composed, expressionless. But inside, my heart was pounding like a drum. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a hallway that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. People moved in and out of cubicles, talking in low voices. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, only that I'd know it when I saw it. And then I did. Lila. She was standing near the copier, laughing softly at something another man had said. Her voice was light, musical, the same tone I'd heard on that bus. My stomach turned cold. I didn't move right away. I just watched her, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way she leaned closer when she talked. Everything about her felt practiced, charming, effortless. And then she looked up and froze. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, with a small, knowing smile, she said, "Raegan." My throat went dry. "So it was you?" I said quietly. She glanced around, lowering her voice. "Let's not do this here." I followed her to a small break room at the end of the hall. The door clicked shut behind us. "I wondered when you'd show up," she said, leaning against the counter. "You knew." I asked. "I figured," she said with a faint shrug. "You always had that look, the kind of woman who carries too much on her shoulders." I stared at her. "You talked to me on that bus. You knew who I was." She didn't deny it. My chest tightened. "Why? What was the point of that?" She folded her arms. "To make you see what he was doing to you. You've been living like a ghost, Raegan. I didn't tell you the truth because I wanted you to see it yourself." I took a step closer. "You were involved with him, weren't you?" Her silence was answer enough. But then she said something that knocked the breath out of me. I ended it before it got worse. She said quietly, "I realized he wasn't what I thought he was. He lied to me too." For a moment, the room felt too small. My anger tangled with disbelief. "You think that makes it better?" "No," she said simply. "But I figured if anyone deserved to know who he really was, it was you." I stood there, torn between rage and a strange, reluctant understanding. There was no shouting, No dramatic confrontation. Just two women standing in the wreckage of the same lie. "I'm sorry," she said after a moment. "For what it's worth." I nodded stiffly, then turned to leave. Sorry doesn't fix what he broke. As I stepped out of the building, the cold air hit my face, sharp and cleansing. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't confused anymore. I was clear. Revenge didn't mean hurting him back. It meant removing myself from his chaos and making sure he saw what he lost. That night, I cooked dinner as usual. I laughed at his jokes, asked about his day, played the role he was used to seeing. And all the while, I was quietly erasing myself from his world. I canceled the joint credit card. I moved my paycheck to a separate account. I started keeping receipts, small details that would matter later. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I was preparing for peace. A few days later, I visited a lawyer during my lunch break. Her office was small but warm, filled with the smell of coffee and fresh paper. "What brings you in today?" she asked. "I just need some advice," I said, "about leaving someone who doesn't want to be left." She smiled gently. "We can work on that." We spent an hour discussing finances, property, steps I'd need to take quietly. When I left, I felt lighter, like a door had cracked open somewhere inside me. That night, I started packing a few things, not everything, just what mattered. Important papers, family photos, my mother's locket. I hid the boxes in the trunk of my car under an old blanket. Every day after that, I played my part perfectly. I woke up before him, made coffee, went to work, came home, smiled. If he noticed the distance, he didn't say anything. But I noticed everything. The late-night texts he tried to hide, the perfume that lingered on his coat, the way he said, "I love you," like it was just something to fill the silence. Each of those moments became another thread in the quiet tapestry of my revenge. Then came the night it all fell apart, not by accident, but by design. It was a Friday. Matt had told me he was working late. I knew better. So I waited. I made dinner, poured wine, turned on the porch light. I sat on the couch in my favorite sweater, the one he never noticed I wore when I felt alone. When the clock hit 11, headlights flashed outside. His car. I stayed seated as he walked in, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. "Long day?" I asked lightly. He hesitated. "Yeah, meetings ran over." I smiled. "Of course." I reached for my wine glass, my voice calm. I stopped by your office this week." The color drained from his face. "You what?" "Sixth floor." I continued. "Met a few of your coworkers. Nice people." He froze. "Raegan." "I met Lila," I said softly. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. He opened his mouth, but I lifted my hand. "Don't bother explaining." She already did. He sank onto the couch, running his hands through his hair. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." I tilted my head. "Oh, I'm sure it wasn't." He looked up, guilt flickering across his face. "I messed up, okay? But I can fix this. We can fix this." I took a long sip of wine, my voice quiet but steady. "You can't fix something you kept breaking for years." He stood, desperate now. "Please, Raegan, don't walk away from this." "I already did," I said simply. His face fell, confusion flickering behind his eyes. I reached for the envelope on the table, the papers I'd prepared days ago. "This is my quiet goodbye." He didn't move as I set it down. "I'm not angry anymore," I said softly. "Just done." He looked at me, disbelief mixing with regret. "You planned this?" "Yes," I said. "Every step. While you were lying, I was preparing. While you were running from responsibility, I was reclaiming my life." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me, Matt." "Not now." For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but then something in him deflated. He knew he'd lost, not because I shouted, but because I stayed calm, because I refused to fight anymore. I left that night without another word. I drove until the city lights faded into darkness, until the hum of the highway drowned out every thought. When I finally stopped, it was near a small diner off Route 71. I sat in the car for a while, watching strangers come and go. A woman in a waitress uniform laughed with an old man at the counter. A young couple held hands over coffee. Ordinary lives. Quiet lives. And for the first time, I wanted that. Peace that didn't need an audience. I walked inside, ordered pie and coffee, and when the waitress asked if I was okay, I smiled. "I will be," I said, and I meant it. The revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't make headlines. It didn't ruin him. It just reminded me that walking away can be the most powerful way to win, because some wars aren't meant to be fought. They're meant to be left behind. The street outside my friend's apartment was quiet that evening, painted in the soft orange of the setting sun. My hands trembled as I clutched my purse, the very same one I had packed years ago when I first came to this city full of dreams and love. Now it felt heavier, not because of what it carried, but because of what I had left behind. I boarded the bus home, the same route I used to take when life felt simpler. The air smelled faintly of rain and coffee, a strange mix that always reminded me of new beginnings. The seats were half empty, and I chose one near the window. As the bus pulled away, the city lights flickered to life, one by one, like tiny reminders that even in darkness, there's always something still shining. For the first time in months, I felt silence, a real calm silence, not the heavy, suffocating one that used to hang in my home after arguments, but a peaceful kind. I leaned my head against the glass, watching familiar streets roll by, each holding a memory I wasn't sure I was ready to face. A little girl across the aisle laughed, clutching a melting ice cream cone. Her mother smiled, gently wiping her cheek. That small moment, so normal, so pure, made my chest tighten. I had spent so long fixing everyone else's world that I'd forgotten what simple joy even looked like. The hum of the bus engine became a kind of comfort. It was steady, rhythmic grounding. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the woman who had unknowingly revealed the truth, the confrontation that changed everything. But mostly, I thought about myself, the woman who had carried everyone else's burdens until her own heart gave out. I pulled my phone from my bag and scrolled through old pictures, birthdays, anniversaries, family dinners. Each smile felt like a lie now, but instead of anger, I felt peace. Because for once, I was no longer pretending. I sent a quick text to my mother. "I'll be coming to visit soon. I need some time with you." It had been years since I'd gone back home. I used to avoid it because it reminded me of the girl I used to be, hopeful, trusting, naive. But maybe that girl wasn't someone to be ashamed of. Maybe she was someone I needed to find again. The bus stopped at a light, and I caught my reflection in the window, tired eyes, but softer now. Not broken, just different. I smiled faintly. It was small, but it was real. A woman sitting beside me leaned over. "Rough day?" she asked kindly. I let out a quiet laugh. More like a rough few years. She nodded, the kind of nod that comes from shared understanding. "You'll be okay," she said. "Women like us always find a way to rise again." Her words sank deep into me. Maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe life had a way of sending the right strangers when you needed them most. As we continued down the road, I noticed we were passing by the park where my husband and I had our first picnic. I remembered how he had made me laugh until I cried that day. I didn't want to erase those memories. They were part of me, part of the woman I had been. But they no longer had power over me. They were just echoes now, lessons wrapped in laughter. The woman beside me got off 2 stops later. She smiled before leaving and said, "Take care of your heart." And for the first time, I knew exactly what that meant. When the bus neared my stop, I didn't feel that familiar ache anymore. I wasn't returning to the same place. Not really. The apartment was still there, the street the same, but I wasn't. I was someone new, someone lighter. As I stepped off the bus, a soft drizzle began to fall. I looked up and let the rain touch my face. It wasn't cold, it was cleansing. The kind of rain that washes away everything you don't need anymore. I walked slowly, breathing in the night air. The world felt different, quieter, softer, like it was finally listening. When I reached home, the lights were still off. The silence didn't scare me this time. I set my bag down and looked around at the photos, the furniture, the memories. It wasn't a prison anymore. It was just a place. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, the city lights glowing in the distance. I thought about the woman on the bus, the one who had unknowingly started my journey of truth, and the one tonight who had given me the courage to finish it. Maybe we were all just passing strangers in each other's stories, leaving tiny sparks behind without realizing it. I took a deep breath and whispered softly, "Thank you." Not to anyone specific, but to everything, the pain, the lessons, the strength that came after. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from my sister. "Mom's so happy you're coming home. She's been waiting for you." Tears filled my eyes, not of sadness, but relief. I realized that going home wasn't just about visiting. It was about returning to myself. That night, I packed my suitcase, but this time it wasn't filled with fear or uncertainty. It was filled with peace. I wasn't running away. I was moving forward. Before going to bed, I opened my journal, the one I had stopped writing in years ago, and wrote a single line. I finally let go of the weight I couldn't carry anymore. The next morning, as the sun rose, I left early for the station. The streets were quiet, washed clean by the night's rain. When I boarded the bus, once more, I didn't sit by the window to watch what I was leaving behind. I looked ahead. A little boy sitting in front of me turned around and waved. I waved back, smiling genuinely this time. There was life ahead, uncertain, imperfect, but mine. As the bus rolled forward, I felt that same comforting hum beneath my feet. Only now, it didn't sound like escape. It sounded like freedom. And as the city disappeared in the rearview mirror, I whispered one last time, "Goodbye, and thank you for the lessons." Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't anger or destruction. It's peace. It's rebuilding quietly, loving yourself fiercely, and finding joy where pain once lived. The road stretched on ahead, long and open, a reminder that healing isn't about forgetting the journey. It's about learning to ride through it with your head held high, one quiet mile at a time. When I look back now, it almost feels like a lifetime ago. That version of me, who carried everyone's dreams, who smiled even when her heart was breaking, who kept giving because she believed love meant endurance. I used to think strength meant holding everything together, no matter how heavy it got. But I was wrong. Real strength, I learned, isn't about carrying it all. It's about knowing when to finally put it down. That bus ride home wasn't just another trip through the city. It was the line between who I had been and who I was becoming. Every turn, every stop, every flicker of light outside the window felt like a quiet whisper telling me, "You did it. You're free now." And I was not because the pain had vanished, but because I had stopped letting it define me. For years, I had lived in a story where I was always the caretaker, the woman who fixed, healed, and forgave. But that day, I realized I could rewrite that story. I could be the woman who chooses herself, not out of bitterness, but out of love. Love for the girl who had once dreamed, for the woman who had survived, and for the future that still waited patiently for her to believe in it again. It wasn't easy after that day. Healing rarely is. There were mornings when the silence felt too big, when I'd catch myself reaching for a voice that wasn't there anymore. There were nights when memories came back uninvited, but instead of fighting them, I let them pass through. Like waves, they came and went, softer each time. Because pain, I learned, loses its sharpness when you stop feeding it with regret. I started rebuilding slowly. Small steps, morning walks, reading again, learning how to cook for one without feeling lonely. I found laughter in small places. A neighbor's joke, a phone call from my sister, the sound of rain against the window. And each time I laughed, it felt like a piece of my soul was coming back home. Sometimes I think about that stranger on the bus, the woman who unknowingly changed everything. I never saw her again, but maybe that's how some people are meant to exist in our lives. Brief, passing, yet unforgettable. She reminded me that life has a strange way of guiding us when we least expect it. One small moment, one simple conversation can wake up a part of you that you thought was gone forever. Now, when I ride the bus home, I don't look out the window searching for what I lost. I look ahead toward what's waiting. I sit quietly grateful for the woman I've become. A woman who's no longer afraid of endings, because she finally understands they make room for new beginnings. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe from your kitchen, your car, or your own quiet corner of the world, I want you to remember something. You don't owe anyone your silence, your suffering, or your strength. You have every right to let go of what breaks you. You have every right to rest, to heal, to start again, no matter how long it takes. Because peace doesn't come when life finally gets easy. It comes the moment you decide you deserve it. So here I am, still learning, still growing, still riding that bus, not away from something, but toward everything I was meant to find. And maybe, just maybe, that's what freedom really feels like.